A year ago tomorrow marks the 1-year anniversary of when I lost my grandfather. And I've been wanting to do a video to sort of tribute him. I know I talk about him in probably all of my videos, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I've been wanting to do some kind of a video to kind of pay a tribute to him. And I thought, instead of coming out here today and being really sad about missing him, which I certainly am, I wanted to do a video that basically gave you guys a better idea of what kind of a person he was. And so I brought a few things out here to show you guys. I don't know that there's much on the table that you haven't seen before. I think there might be a couple of things here you haven't seen, but I wanted to do this because he was the most influential person in my life, an incredible human being, an extremely hardworking man, and I miss him a lot. So here are just a few things that he either gave me when I was, some of these things a lot younger, some of these things just a few years ago. But they almost all have some kind of a story or relevance. So I thought you guys might find some of this stuff interesting. One of the, not the first memories I have of him, but a memory I have from many years ago was he taught me how to read a compass. And he took me out to the yard one day. He and my grandmother live on a pretty good sized farm. Well, not really big, but 15 so acres, more than just a front backyard. And we went outside and he said, I want you to learn how to read a compass, because he learned when he was in the Boy Scouts. And what he did was he had gone around the property. He started at one tree, and he took a little sticky note and like a thumbtack, and he put the sticky note on the tree, and he marked its coordinates. And he took a heading, and then he went so many paces to the next tree that he picked, and did another sticky note, and so on and so on. And he did it to about 10 different trees, all pretty good distance apart. And so when he brought me outside, he said, here's where you start. And I had the first tree, and it had the note in it. And he taught me to, all right, now here's how you read the compass. And he taught me how. And from each tree, I had to, take the new heading and go so many paces and essentially go from point A to B to C and so forth. And so the fact that he taught me with this compass that he got when he was in the Boy Scouts, this has always been kind of a special thing to me. And yes, I still remember and still can read a compass. It was just a neat moment. I remember at the last tree I got to, he had put I think maybe a $5 or a $10 bill. He used one of the push pins and stuck that, that $5 bill onto the tree. And so when I got to the last one, there was like a prize, and it was a fun memory that he and I shared, and I'm still really glad that I've been able to keep track of this over the years, and this compass really does actually mean a lot to me. That's all this video is, guys. It's just a few items here with a little story with it. If you're not interested, I understand. I hope maybe one or two of you will find this kind of interesting. Probably the next thing is this Mossberg Model 152. This was the first firearm that I ever shot. It didn't have the scope on it back years ago. That was something that he and I put on it maybe 10 years ago. But it was just traditional iron sights. But this was the first firearm that he started me on. And he knew that with proper handling and using good judgment, having a parent to teach good judgment to a child, teaching him safety, teaching him responsibility. He knew how much fun firearms can be if they're handled responsibly. And I'm so thankful that it wasn't a situation where firearms were, where someone acts like, oh, they're evil, you can't be around them, you might, if you touch one, you're going to kill yourself or you're going to kill somebody else, or any of that nonsense. It was like anything else. I mean, it was like learning how to drive. It was like, here's what this is, and if you're going to be around it, you're going to do it right. You're going to be responsible, and this is how you're going to do it. And so this is what he started me on. Basic marksmanship fundamentals, even as a little kid, just a little .22 rifle. The interesting thing about this rifle is when he was 12, I believe he was 12 years old, his mom bought him this rifle. His father was killed on a motorcycle when he was very young. I think he was 8. And so it was him and his brother and their mom. His mom bought him this rifle when he was 12. He kept it all those years, and lo and behold, it was the rifle that I learned how to shoot on. And hopefully one day it'll be the rifle I'm passing on to one of my kids. I remember as a kid, I thought it was so cool. The front forend folds down like that. And I remember just thinking that was just a really neat thing. You didn't really see anything else at the time that did anything like that. So I remember thinking that was really interesting. But I can't tell you how many times we shot this rifle. Again, it was iron sights. A few years ago, he wanted to put a scope on it. So we did a little cheap, it's a Hawk, a little cheap Hawk sight. Just still for plinking, but a really fun rifle. This was kind of the beginning for me, and hopefully it'll be the same, for maybe one of my own someday. After that, I guess kind of going hand in hand with firearms, he had a lot of guns around the house and not necessarily locked up. He had them sort of hidden, but he had them in places where he knew he could get to them. This is his Smith & Wesson. It's a Model 60. I am going to leave the cylinder open because the cylinder is loaded. I thought I might take a few shots while I'm out here. But this was his Smith & Wesson. This was one of the guns that he kept right under his bed. He had them all throughout the house. I knew where they all were. Even as a kid, I knew where they all were. Never touched them, never did anything irresponsible with them that I shouldn't have, but I did know where they were, and I had the proper respect for them. And this is one that I remember seeing it so many times laying under his bed. And then, of course, sometimes we would take it out and we would shoot it. This was one that anytime I think of him, I think of this gun, just because I remember seeing it at his house so much. It just kind of had that connotation. It was like, when I thought of him, I thought of this Smith & Wesson Sun-Nose revolver. So, along with that, I'll close the cylinder up, put it back in the holster just for a moment. Along with that, I remember him taking me out into the fields. They had fields where they had some cattle, and I remember us going out in the fields one day, and we had a little area where we would do all of our shooting. And I remember him telling me, he said, "I want to show you the world's lightest pistol." And he reached into his back pocket, and this is what he pulled out. And I remember I was not really believing him that it was the world's lightest. And that was exactly how he said it. He said, "This is the world's lightest pistol." Well, yeah, now that I know a little bit more about guns, it's his Keltec P32, and this one was his. It was a first generation. This one is also loaded, so I'm going to keep it pointed in a safe direction. This was his Keltec model P32, and I remember he unloaded it. I remember he handed it to me the first time I held it, and I thought, yeah, that definitely feels really light. Even as a kid, I thought, man, hard to believe that that's an actual firearm. I mean, it looks like a toy. Certainly knew it wasn't, but felt like one. And I remember him handing it to me, and he loaded one round into the magazine, put the magazine in, and racked it into the chamber, and he wanted me to take one shot with it, just one. He just put one round in it. And I remember as a kid, I learned to hate this gun because I was scared of the trigger. It's a long double action trigger, obviously, and as a kid, I did not like this. This was not something I enjoyed shooting. I remember I tried to shoot it once, and the trigger didn't break where I thought it was, and so then I took my finger back off the trigger and kind of readjusted my hand and tried to shoot it again, and still couldn't quite get it to, and he's there with me the whole time. No, you got to do it like this. Now listen, do it like this. So finally I got it, and I hated it. I handed it back to him. I said I didn't like that. And of course he just kind of laughed and put it back into his pocket. But I remember he really liked these little wallet holsters. Some people love these things. Some people hate these things. I'm kind of indifferent. I think it's okay. It does make carrying it in your back pocket nice, but as far as shooting, it's kind of rough. But he really liked this. He liked carrying it just like this, and he always carried this little P32 in his back hip pocket. So that's always where he carried his gun. He didn't like carrying large caliber guns because they weren't comfortable. I mean, same reason a lot of us don't like to carry something big and heavy, because it's awkward and it weighs you down. And so he always had this little 32 in his back pocket. It didn't matter where we were. I knew that he had his gun on him. The next thing, and probably my favorite thing on the table here that I thought I'd talk to you guys about, his Spyderco. This is probably, of anything on the table here, this is probably the single thing that makes me think of him the most. His Spyderco Endura. It's one of the earlier generations of Enduras. I hope this is showing up well. He always had this in his pocket, always. It was just one of those things where, as a kid, if it was like Christmas or a birthday or something like that, if somebody was opening a present or a package or anything like that, us kids, we wouldn't even fool with trying to open it ourselves. We basically open the package and, oh, hey, cool. And if it was something that needed to be cut, we just passed it down to him. We didn't even say anything, we just passed it down to him. And of course, he'd reach into his pocket and open it. He was always really kind of slow and graceful about the way he even deployed the blade. He never did any of this nonsense like we like to do. He was always very just slow and smooth about it. And when he passed away, he acquired a lot of things throughout his lifetime. He worked very hard, and he was born poor. I'll just say it. He was poor when he was a little kid. And at the end of his life, with all the work he had done, he was really interested in anything financial. He worked hard for his money, but then once he had a little money, he wanted to learn how to make his money work for him. And there at the end of his life, he had really kind of made something for his family, financially speaking. And it was kind of a, sorry, as I'm telling that story, I'm already kind of starting to go into other stories in my mind. I'm just kind of rambling here. But he had a lot of things that he had acquired throughout his life. And when he passed away, out of all the things that he had worked to have, probably the only one item that I really kind of wanted for my own was this. It's his knife. When I graduated college, he gave me this. This was my first Spyderco. He had both of these knives along with a Benchmade Griptilian, the orange one. Those were the 3 knives that he had. He had had this knife the longest and liked it so well at one point he bought a second one just to have a second one in case he ever, this one lost it or broke it or anything. And I don't really remember why he bought the Benchmade. He never carried the Benchmade much. At any rate, I remember him telling me probably about 2 years before I finished my bachelor's degree, I remember him telling me, he said, when you graduate, I'm going to give you one of those knives. And believe it or not, on more than one occasion when I was trying to finish my degree, this was the source of inspiration because I really wanted it. I really wanted, not because it was a knife necessarily, but because it was one of his knives. And so once I graduated, sure enough, I came over one day, he laid out all 3 knives on the table, this one, that one, and the Benchmade, and he said, pick which one you want. And of course, I couldn't take this because I knew this was his, this was like his left hand. And so I picked this one, and he kind of smiled and he said, I thought you'd take that Spyderco. That's the better knife, really. And he always loved that this was a product that was made that you could open one-handed and close one-handed. I remember him talking about that so much. He said, those are great because you could, if you're on a ladder or if you're doing something with your other hand, if you're working on something and you've only got one hand, he said you can open these and close them with one hand. And he really liked that. And as you guys know, I have developed a bit of an addiction to Spyderco and I'm currently seeking professional help, so yay for me. One of the other things I have here, this was a knife he gave me probably about 6 months before he passed. He was aware of my little YouTube channel here. I showed him the channel when I would go over to his house, and he loved watching the videos. And I went over there at one point, like I said, it was not too long before he passed, and he said, I want you to take this knife. He said, this is kind of an interesting knife that I don't think you have one of. And he was right. This is actually a case. This is one of their fixed blade knives. And the interesting thing about this knife is he used it for dressing deer. When he would go hunting, which he hadn't done in many, many years. That was one thing that he and I only did, I think, twice together, was go hunting. Neither of us were big hunters. But he would use this when he was younger. After he would, if he got a deer, he would use this to basically field dress the deer. And he had sort of, I don't know, kind of engraved into the leather there. I don't know, he probably used some kind of a little tool to dig it in there, maybe like a Dremel, but LP, his initials. And the interesting thing about the sheath is under his initials are the initials of my great-grandfather. So this was actually my great-grandfather's knife. He gave it to my grandfather, his son-in-law, and then it was given to me. So kind of a neat item there. That's about all I have on the table here, guys. I can't go anywhere in my house out here in my in this big, wonderful, beautiful building that I have. I can't look anywhere and see things that don't make me think of him. There's so many things I have from him. Memories, stories. I could ramble on for. I could probably sit here in front of this camera for 2 or 3 days without stopping, just telling stories. But I appreciate, if any of you are still watching this video, I appreciate you guys listening. Tomorrow's going to be a difficult day. 1 year since we lost him. We lost him, unfortunately, to cancer. It was a spindle cell sarcoma. Extremely aggressive. He was in top physical shape his whole life. Very active. an impressive career. He was in the United States Navy. He worked for the railroad as a brakeman. He worked as a pipe fitter and welder. Worked as a fireman his whole life. Was in the National Guard before joining the Navy. And then as far as his career, he was employed by TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, and worked as an electrician basically his whole life. And a brilliant man, an incredible man, and all of the experiences that I think a young man should be able to have as a child. I had all of those experiences, plus a lot more with him. An incredible person. So I appreciate you listening to the rambling. Some neat things here. Before I close the video, I'm going to put my hearing protection on and take a couple shots with this this beautiful Smith & Wesson Model 60. Just got to have a little shooting in the video. And guys, let me know, those of you who have stayed to watch this whole thing, let me know, do you have or did you have someone in your life that sort of gave you these same kinds of memories and life lessons and experiences? I'd be curious to know how many of you have a similar story or similar upbringing. I know I'm very blessed. I know I'm very fortunate to have the upbringing in the childhood that I was able to have. And just curious to know how many of you guys are blessed with the same thing. Again, thank you to all of you who watch. I'm still amazed that anybody watches these videos. With YouTube today, there are so many great sources of information out there. These videos, I don't do anything in terms of editing, as you guys can tell. It's basically just me sitting here talking to you, or shooting, or reviewing a pocket knife of some kind. I really appreciate those of you who watch. Those of you that have been watching for the last couple of years seem to really enjoy the channel. I just wanted to show you guys some neat things, maybe with a neat story that goes along with it. That's all this is. It's nothing flashy, it's nothing exciting, but it is true. It's all honest, and it's simple, but I don't know, I kind of like simple. So anyway, appreciate you guys watching. Let's finish the video here with 5 shots out of the Model 60. Thanks for watching.